Hey guys, welcome back. So now we are getting into number 3 of Heroes Reborn, and it's so much a Flash story, it really is. But even with it being that way, there's a couple twists in here that are very not Flash-like, and the mixture of the two makes it super intriguing. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for Heroes Reborn number 3, this time around it's very much a story about the Blur, which means like just get ready for all the speedster references you can think of. And even when we jump in as soon as the first page, because when we pick up with the Blur, Stanley Stewart, he's sitting at home watching from his 48 different televisions, and on one of these TVs it very much looks like Mephisto cooking, which is almost like a missed opportunity to call it Hell's Kitchen. But I also believe cooking with Mephisto would be nice too. But while he's here, Stanley Stewart runs us through like the life and times of how it is to be a speedster. And from how he describes it, it's like a gift and a curse, because he describes it like sometimes he'll laugh so hard he'll vibrate through his chair, which is interesting, the whole vibrating through objects thing. Like, I think I've seen that somewhere before. But his shoe closet is bigger than a house, and he can't play games online because no Wi-Fi can keep up with him. He has 5 dates in 3 different countries, and he takes 500 selfies in a day, which kind of tells us a bit early on that he's a bit of a narcissist. But after this, we then get the introduction, or like the opening credits to the Blur, who is the fastest mortal alive. But also in the beginning, we get a brief description of his origin, which tells that he went through a strange mist, which magically altered his body chemistry. And during his time while he's not saving the world, Stanley Stewart, he's a mail carrier, window washer, dog walker, barista, and computer programmer, to where sometimes he does all of them in the same day, but most of the time you can find him saving the world as the Blur. But also after this intro, we then get an example of some of the Blur's duties, like as a hero, and from there it takes us into the story. But first we see Stanley Stewart coming from a secret Siberian lair, where at one point he went up against Ursa Major, who rather than being on the Winter Guard or part of Agents of Wakanda, Ursa Major's just a straight up villain. But this fight also put him through an attack by a number of artificially evolved man-eating minions who he had to get through that were sent by Ursa. But eventually all of this brings us back to Washington DC, to where at this point he's going up against this world's version of the Scarlet Witch, who's known as the Silver Witch, who, like we've seen in the first issue, after the death of her brother Quicksilver, she absorbed his powers, which is how she's now able to throw a number of high-speed hexes at the Blur, sending them 1,000 spells a minute. And with her doing this, she's also claimed the name Speedster Supreme, but according to Stanley, he has a litigation pending on that name. But while this match is going on, Stanley is live streaming it because for one, he doesn't take the Silver Witch that serious. And with the way that this comes off, it's likely because Stanley was already faster than her brother before he died. Because throughout this matchup, we get a bit of that story, with Stanley mentioning that Quicksilver burned himself out trying to keep up with him. But with Stanley not taking this version of Wanda seriously, it catches up to him quick, and no pun intended. But with Stanley being a bit cocky, knowing that he's faster than Wanda, she then hits him with the get over here hex, and she snatches like a portion of his soul. So it's kind of like a bit of Scorpion and Shang Tsung 2 for 1. And initially when I saw this, I thought she was pulling like his astral form like completely out of his body. But with her taking just a portion of his soul, she did this very intentionally. And we find this out when she goes back and she stands over him and she tells him that she wants him to wake up because he doesn't deserve the luxury of fading away in his sleep, but instead she wants him to die like her brother did, on his feet, screaming. And this is why she only took a portion of his soul, because from there she just takes off with it and she drags it into the Dread Dimension, which I'm pretty sure is still the Dark Dimension, which also has been referred to as the Dread Dimension. And I'm pretty much leaning towards that because this place is also littered with mindless ones. But with the Silver Witch snatching a piece of his soul and taking off with it and going here like she's playing a game of keep away, and Stanley has to go after her in order to quote unquote literally save his own soul, or a portion of it at least. But with going after her and trying to figure out like how he's gonna one up her, he then thinks about a number of his other previous adventures at both times in the future and the past of this reality, because at this point he's having trouble keeping up with her. But with him thinking through these different scenarios and kind of fishing for a new idea for this situation, like it's here where he then gives us the narration and just takes us through like one time where he raced from one end of the multiverse to the other, to where when he did, he went up against Death and he faced her in her ring-powered Infinity Chopper, which sounds a lot like a reference to the Thanos, or the version of Thanos from this reality, with all of the Infinity Ring stuff going on, which we're likely to see more of in issue 4. But then he also talks about a previous run-in with the Ultron that we'd seen, who had used his pin particles to shrink down and go into Hyperion's lower intestines, and also another time where he ran into the future and he faced off with this world's version of Doom 2099. But it's also interesting when he mentions Doom 2099 and he says that Doom was messing with American history, and when he said that, it kind of had me thinking like, this is the second time recently we've gotten a Doom 2099 reference. And it could mean something, might mean nothing, but I just found it intriguing. But for Stanley Stewart, after thinking of his past escapades and experiences, to where collectively he starts to come up with the solution. And it's here where he runs faster than light and vibrates out of sync with himself, racing through his timeline. And when he does this, he revisits the Johnny Blaze of this world, who is a speedster and also Ghost Rider, known as the Ghost Runner, the speedster of vengeance. And with seeing this, I gotta admit, like, I'm intrigued. Like, I'd really like to see how that whole thing went down, like at least in the one shot or something. But I mean, like, with seeing this, we do know how it actually ended, with Stanley going back through this moment and mentioning that Johnny Blaze's leg bones melted, trying to keep up with him the first time. But I'd still like to see that story just to see how the events played out before. But with Stanley making this shortcut through his timeline, he then takes a power nap in the 33rd century, and when he says power nap, he mentions it was like a few years. But then when he comes back, he skips way closer to the Silver Witch. But even just before he arrived, Wanda had pretty much figured that he was done, because before he got there, she didn't see him behind her, and up to this point, she could feel his soul power fading. And when she did, she figured like after she killed the Blur, that maybe this world wouldn't feel wrong anymore, which more or less points to her realizing that this world isn't how it's supposed to be. And even when he gets there, she tells him like, your soul shouldn't be so easy to snatch from your body. And that's likely a reference to not only this world being false in many ways, but then it's also likely a reference to your alternate version of Stanley Stewart from Earth 712, to where when that world was about to end and there was only a portal that could take one person at a time from their Earth to a safer one, so the Squadron Supreme fought amongst themselves and pretty much killed each other, because otherwise with them going through one at a time and the portal needing to recharge, they all wouldn't have made it. And in that case, only Zarda made it through, leaving everyone else dead. So it kind of feels like that's what Wanda's referring to, even though she doesn't know like the specifics of why this world is wrong or how exactly Stanley's other death had went down. But when this Stanley catches up to her, she just says no more speed. And right after that, he describes the feeling as being stuck in melted adamantium. And it's like, man, the references are just flying left and right out of here. House of M, Death of Wolverine, Flash, everything. Like, this issue's going crazy. But right after Wanda says no more speed, she then just walks off slowly, because it's like there's no point in running. And she tells the Blur to die slow, which is so messed up. But when this happens, like, Stanley truly believes that this is the end. Like, this is how she's gonna kill him. And when we see this, it's like it's here where we immediately go into this flashback with Stanley not long after he became a speedster, which interestingly enough takes us to Tibet, to the mystical monastery of Carnage, where Stanley went to see the Ancient One in order to study the mystic arts and get his speed under control. And with seeing this, we find out that it was the Vishanti that granted him the speed of the wind, but with him initially having this power, he just couldn't control it. And the Ancient One let him know that the answer that he seeks is within the mystic arts. So Stanley then read every book that he could in Carnage, and even still he didn't know what to do. But with thinking back on this, he remembers the Ancient One telling him to just sit and look at this flower. And it's here where it gets crazy. Like, this is where you cue the Flash music, like the because when he thinks back on the moment of the exercise of staring at that flower, which was an exercise that took him 17 days to figure out. Like, the Ancient One told him, he's like, man, you slow, it's gonna take a while. But what Stanley discovered while staring at this flower was that rather than running or going super fast, he could just sit still and see all of time in one given place at one moment. And when he discovered this, like, this eye opened up in his forehead, which was very Agamotto-like, but in this case with him using the mystical arts along with his speed, not only could he see throughout time in a given space, but he could also interact with it. And it's a pretty cool concept, because whatever passes through this particular space at any point in time, he could just reach out and snatch it and use it at his disposal. And that's the idea that he comes to, since at this point he can't physically chase and catch Wanda. And when he does this, he hops on a Wraith Whale and he uses it to get the drop on Wanda while she's watching his soul just like fade into nothing. But this is how he gets his soul back, stops Wanda, and he then rides the whale back to their dimension. But also he admits with doing this that he noticed cracks in this reality, or more so saying that there was cracks in everything, seeing the way that this reality was built. And with taking Wanda back, he just drops her off at Ravencroft, though she's not technically insane, but I guess this is like Marvel's version of Arkham now, or at least in this version of Heroes Reborn. But also like in a way, I feel like it kind of works. But also when we see Wanda go in, she's saying like, I'm not crazy, like I'm not insane, this world and everything outside, like that's the madhouse. Which clearly gives us a bit of foreshadowing for what's to come. But as far as the Blur, his speed comes back after Wanda's hex wears off, and right after that, he's then chased by the speedster, Eternity. I'm like, this is so crazy, but I'm intrigued. I am very intrigued. But then after this, we then go back to another part of Ravencroft as we go into like the epilogue portion of the story, to where it seems like Bullseye's about to kill this guy with the tooth. But then check this out, like as soon as this happens, a rat then crawls in the room, or the showers or whatever, and when it crawls on Bullseye, like he's okay until the rat catches on fire. Because I guess he's okay with rats walking up to him and crawling on him, but if it catches on fire, ooh, no, that's a problem. But with this happening, we quickly find out that it was sent by Maya Lopez, who's the most recent host of the Phoenix Force, just before the whole world had went to this. But also at this time we find out that in this new world she's also at Ravencroft, and she's here of her own will. Because I mean, she has the Phoenix Force, what are they gonna do? Put handcuffs on her? Because you probably just burn the whole planet and leave the handcuffs floating in space as a message. But while we see her here just on the roof of Ravencroft, on one hand she's keeping an eye on some of the things going on inside, like the arrival of Wanda Maximoff and Bullseye throwing teeth at people. But also on the other hand, she doesn't know if she's any better than the other people that are in there. Because though she knows this world isn't right, she can't exactly remember if she destroyed the last one, or what exactly happened to make the world the way that it is. Because at this point, she's still figuring out the Phoenix Force and what it can do. And if anything, the one thing that she's certain of is that the Phoenix hungers, like how a fire hungers for a barrel of gasoline. But at this point, she doesn't want to be an echo of who she previously was, which in itself is kind of a play on words, but she very much means it in a literal sense. But then while she's here, she's then approached by Blade and Captain America, who then approach her soliciting her help because Blade had told Cap she has a Phoenix Force and it can destroy worlds, which is precisely what they want to do to this one and find a way to bring back the old one. Because the two of them knew, like before approaching Maya, that some sharp teeth in a frisbee just wasn't gonna cut it. But when this happens and Cap literally tells her like we're putting together a team, in her mind she's already saying yes. Because for one, she knows this world isn't right, but then also she has a Phoenix Force, and the Phoenix Force is just always ready to consume a world. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because this was a wild one. And we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.